this video, we will be filling out the rest of the collection view, and it's going to use a couple of different cells to do that. And we're going to use the same content struct as our data backing those views, but we're going to use different views to do it. So what I want to do to make this as reusable as possible is to take the small square cell wrapper that we wrote last time and make it into a generic content cell wrapper that will have some view that is able to configure content. To do that, let's first define a protocol. We're going to, in collection view elements, add a new file. So we are going to make a new file called content cell. Here we need to import Anchorage and UIKit. And we're going to define a protocol, which I'm going to call content configuring view, which is a UI view. All this needs to have is a method called configure with content. And that's it. So to conform to this protocol, we need to be a UI view and we need to have a function called configure. That's convenient because our small square view already does both of those things. So what I'm going to do is grab the small square cell from this class. I'm going to cut it, Command X. I'm going to drop it in here. We're going to change the name to be content cell. And it needs to be generic. It's going to have a view that conforms to content configuring view. This just needs to be a view now, so it's going to be whatever type we're wrapping. Then on our registration, it needs to be, instead of small square cell, it's going to be a content cell with that view type for the registration. And we can get rid of this here because the compiler will be able to figure it out. Okay, so now we have a generic version of this content cell, which wraps some view. And in the case of our small square cell, it will be wrapping the small square view. So in here, I'm just going to add a type alias. Actually, I'll do it up at the top. We're going to add a type alias for small square cell. That's going to be a content cell of type small square view, which will work great, except all our small square view does not conform to that protocol yet. So we need to add that content configuring view. Now the app should build and run. And if we actually run it, it should look the same as it did before. So we still have our cell here. It looks like it should. And the reason I'm adding this type alias is just so that other places where we've used small square cell will continue to compile. And it will give you autocomplete also. So now we have like a generic way to define those. All we really need to do is define a view and then give it a type alias, wrap it in as content cell. So for our second cell, we're going to have a large square cell. This time we're going to be building this layout here with a big square and a title. Some of them will also have subtitles. So we need to have both of those things. So we're going to add a new file called large square cell. And in here we need to import Anchorage and import UIKit. We are going to have a class called large square view. It needs to be a programmatic view. And it needs to be a content configuring view. It is going to have a main stack going to have a image view. It's going to have a label stack. And have a title label. Subtitle label. Okay, then in configure, we're going to set our main stack's axis equal to vertical. This is going to be a stack view that holds the image and the label stack. We're going to set its spacing equal to 10. Our image view is background color. We're going to use secondary system fill. We're going to set the corner radius to 8 and mask to bounds equal to true. Our label stack axis needs to equal vertical, and the label stack spacing is going to equal 2. Then our title label font is going to be a custom headline style, and the text color we're going to set to label. And same for our subtitle label. We're going to set the font to subheadline and set the subtitle label's text color equal to label. Then in constrain, we need to add our main stack subview. To our main stack, we're going to add arranged subviews, the image view, and the label stack. And to the label stack, we're going to add an arranged subview, title label, and subtitle label. Then we need to set the main stack's edge anchors equal to the edge anchors of the view. This will set the top, leading, trailing, and bottom anchors equal with one line. And then we need to set the image view's width anchor equal to the image view's height anchor. That should do it. Now we need to add our configure method because we don't conform to this protocol yet. So compiler will generate that for us, except for I'm going to put it down at the bottom. And in here, we need to set our title label's text equal to the title. Sorry, the content.title. The subtitle label's text equal to the content.subtitle. And the image view's image UI image named content.image. Okay, and that gives us our large square view. Now we just need to throw it in the wrapper. Type alias large square cell equals content cell wrapping the large square view. That should compile just fine. Cool. So now we have that laid out. We need to add the section. So this time it's still a side scrolling section, but we only have one item at a time. So back in NS collection layout section, we're going to add a new static function called side scrolling one item. Just going to return an NS collection layout section. It's going to look very similar to the previous one, but with only one item per group. So the item size is still going to be a fractional width of 1. The height is going to be an estimated 312. We don't need content insets on this one. The group size, it's going to be a fractional width of 0.7 and an estimated height of 312. For the group, we're going to use a different initializer. We're going to use horizontal layout size with the group size and the sub items item. Then for section, we're still just going to pass in the group. We still want group paging. We still want 12 inner item spacing, and we still want 20, 20, 20, 20 on the content insets. And we're going to return the section. So there we have the definition of our section. Pretty easy. Once you have one, you can pretty much just copy and paste and change the things that you need. Now we need to uncomment some more of those sections. So we're going to go to our content model. We are going to move this set of slashes over here, just comment out the last section because it's a little different looking. And then in the stub data, we need to uncomment stays, experiences, and hosting. So that we have that stub data. Then we need to update our make collection view and make data source methods. For now, we're just going to default, because all of these sections are going to use the same type. We're just going to, we don't need a case. We're just going to default to returning these side scrolling one item section in make collection view. And then in this switch statement, we are going to default to, we're going to let our registration equal large square cell dot registration. We're going to return view DQ configured reusable cell using registration for index path with content. Cool. So now if we run it, you can see how much easier it is to add the second, third, and fourth sections than it was to add the first. We now have these large square sections. All we had to do was define the cell, define the section, and plug it in. So there's that. Now, if we look at the spec, you can see that these have headers. So this one has a header that's just a title. This one has a header with a subtitle. This one has a header that's just a title. But so all of these other sections have headers that our first section doesn't. So to do that, we need a UI collection reusable view. So we're going to make a new wrapper that's going to be called section. Actually, let's call it content header. Content header. We have a content cell and a content header. This will need anchorage and UI kit. We are going to add another protocol. It's going to be essentially the same thing as the content configuring view, but I want a separate protocol that does effectively the same thing in case the requirements change down the line. So I'm just going to copy that, call it content configuring header. And then we need a class which effectively does the same thing as the content cell. So I'm just going to grab this, copy and paste it for now, and we'll change what we need to change, except for this will be content header, and it needs to be a UI collection reusable view. We still need a view. We still need to override and call constrain. We still need to add the subview. except for we don't have a content view anymore. We just have the main view itself. The edge anchors, we're going to set to the layout margins guide. Actually, no, we're not. We're just going to use the edge anchors of the view. For now, we still need to configure with content. We're just going to pass that on to the view. Then our registration is going to look a little different. So in the registration for a supplementary view, you only get the index path of the content. They don't hand you the content. So we need to pass that into the registration function. So we are going to have a parameter that takes an array of content, array of optional content, and it's going to return a UI collection view supplementary registration. Registration of type content header type view, and there's no second generic parameter here. Then we need to return UI collection view supplementary registration element kind. For right now, we're just going to call this header. And then that takes a closure, which gets the header. A string, which is the element kind, which is not particularly useful. So actually we'll just leave it underscored. And then it doesn't get the content, it gets an index path. So what we need to do here is grab the content, and configure our header with it. So this gets passed into the function. We're just grabbing it out of there and configuring it. Now, right now we're using this string to keep track of the element kind. I don't really like that. I would prefer to use enum so that I get autocomplete and don't have to worry about misspellings. So I'm going to add an enum. This will be an extension on UI collection. Extension on UI collection view. It's going to be an enum called element kind, which has a raw value of string. Right now we just need a header case. Then I'm going to add an extension on UI collection view supplementary registration, which is has an initializer that takes a kind, which is UI collection view element kind, and a handler, which is escaping UI collection view dot supplementary registration type supplementary dot handler. And it is just going to call self.init the element kind of kind.raw value and pass through the handler. Okay, so we're just wrapping, this is a built-in initializer that takes the element kind string, that's the initializer we're using now, and then this is just a long name for this closure. So what we're doing is letting ourselves pass in the enum directly and then just using the string value of that enum. So that way we get autocomplete. We can do this in our registration, kind dot header. Okay, so now we have our generic content header. We're going to make a section header. So what we're going to do is make a class called section header view. It's going to be a programmatic view, a content configuring view. It's going to be pretty simple. It just has a private title label, private subtitle label. Configure. We are going to set the directional layout margins equal to 24 on the top, 0, 0, and 0. The reason we're doing this is to give ourselves some space in between the previous content and the next section header. Then our title label.font. We're going to need a new custom style here, which will be title 2, which we'll define in a minute. We're going to say title label.number of lines equals 0. Title label.text color equals the label. And subtitle label.font equals custom title 4. Subtitle label dot number of lines equals 0. Subtitle label dot text color equals dot label. Okay, so we need to define our custom fonts, but other than that, this is pretty much what we need to do in configure. We're setting it the number of lines equal to 0 so that it can overflow and take up more than one line. It'll take up as however much space it needs. If we wanted to support dynamic font sizes here, we could add title label that adjusts font for content size category equal to true. Then as the user changes their font size, it will live update in the app. Okay, so let's add these fonts real quick. Yeah, font plus custom. I'm going to put the titles up at the top. So I'm going to start with title 2. Oh, needs to be a bar. And I'm just going to copy this so I don't have to write it all out again. It's going to be title 2 for system font of size 18, weight bold. We're going to have a scaled font of size 15, weight light. Okay, then we need to add a case title 2 and a case title 4. Okay, so now our code should compile back in the content header. Don't have a configure function yet, but that's okay. Let's first add our constraints. This will be pretty simple. We're going to have a stack view, which we're not going to hold on to. It will just be a local reference. So I don't need to do anything with it. Later, we're just going to pass in our title label and subtitle label. We're going to set the axis equal to vertical and spacing equal to 4. We're going to add the subview, that stack view, and we're going to set the edge anchors. Equal to the layout margins guide edge anchors. We're doing that so that we get this 24 points of space at the top. Now we just need a configure with content method. And here we just need to say title label.text equals content.title and subtitle label.text equals content.subtitle. Now we should compile again. Cool. That's running. Okay, so we need to add some content for those headers. Have another commented out section here, which we can uncomment. We need to comment out the info one because we don't have that case yet, but everything else is fine. Then we need to update our data source method in home view to use the content. So we're going to grab our headers. It's going to be the section all cases.map. It will be the header content. So now this is an array of content, of optional content, which conveniently is exactly what our registration takes. So we're going to say let header section. Oh, did make the type alias. So back in content header, we have our view. We need to add type alias called section header, which is going to be a content header type section header view. Okay, so now here we can say this registration equals section. Let me compile so it shows up in autocomplete. Section header dot registration with the headers. Then our data source has this supplementary view provider. It's a closure. Has a collection view, a string, and index path. And it needs to return a supplementary view, UI collection reusable view. Fortunately, collection view has a DQ reusable supplementary view of kind. And here, sorry, this is the wrong function. We need a DQ configured reusable supplementary view using our header registration for the index path we're given. And that should be all we need to add those headers into the data source. We're still returning it at the end of this function. Then we need to add the size of the header into the definitions of the section layouts in the NS collection view. We need to in here define the size of our section headers. But before we do that, we're going to add one more thing to content header, another extension that's going to make our lives a little bit easier, which is an extension on NS collection layout boundary supplementary item. It is going to have a convenience init, which takes a layout size, which is an NS collection layout size. It needs a kind, which is going to be a UI collection view element kind, which we defined before. And it's going to take an alignment, which is an NS rect alignment. What that is going to do is call self.init, the layout size, element kind dot value, and alignment. This is doing a very similar wrapper to this. But then, so we can use that if we want, but an even more convenient thing that we can add is this static function called header, which takes just a layout size. And it is going to return an NS collection layout boundary supplementary item. What that is going to do is return, it's going to use the layout size we're given, it's going to use the kind header and the alignment top. So this will put it at the top of the section with the header. So now we have this method that we can call with just the layout size when we want to define a header. Let's look at what that looks like. So if we go back to NS collection layout section extensions, to our side scrolling one item section, we can, I'm going to define this right before the section. We're going to say let header size equal NS collection layout size. The width dimension of fractional width 1. It's going to take the full width of the parent, and a height dimension estimated 100. So using this estimated will let it be a little bit smaller when there's only one line of text, or bigger if there's multiple lines. Then we need to define our header. NS collection layout boundary supplementary item dot header with the header size. This is a similar pattern that you see to group. NS collection layout group has this static function called horizontal, class function I guess, that takes in a size and some sub items and returns a layout group. So that's why I picked this pattern. Then in our section, we just need to add the boundary supplementary items is equal to this array, which has our header in it. So now that we have all the pieces in place, should be able to run the app and we can see our headers. Experience the world, we've got multiple lines here, we've got one line here, the spacing looks good everywhere. Looking pretty close to our spec. It's not dark yet, but we'll deal with that in the next video. But the spacing looks about right. Pretty close at least. Okay, so there you have it. We have now got, we don't have all of the content for the collection view, but we have most of it. We added 3 more sections here. But all it took was defining one new cell and one new layout, and then some stuff for the header. All right, in the next video, we will take a look at doing this dark section, seeing what it takes to get that involved and what it may take in dark mode. So right now, we have pretty good support. If we just rerun the app and I click the right button, we have pretty good support for dark mode if we just toggle it on. But in the next video, we will look at how are we going to deal with that on this dark section. All right, I'll see you there.